I'm a petite woman living alone in a sprawling city, and I'm always on high alert because I know exactly what that can mean for someone like me. I'm cautious, constantly aware of my surroundings and the people in them. Recently, I moved to a new apartment on the third floor at the back of a large complex, a move I was thrilled about since I've always hated the vulnerability of ground floor living. The higher elevation felt safer, more removed from the world below. A few days after settling in, I met my across-the-hall neighbor, Steve. He was tall and lanky, with dark hair and a scruffy attempt at a beard. In our brief encounters, passing each other in the hallway or on the stairs, he seemed polite enough, offering a quick nod or a soft hello. Our interactions never went beyond those fleeting exchanges, and I was fine with that. I kept to myself, and he didn't push for more. That changed one Saturday night. I'd been out with a friend, drinking more than I should have, and she dropped me off at my apartment well past midnight. I stumbled up the stairs, my footsteps loud and clumsy, the kind of racket that could wake the whole building. I was too drunk to care much, but as I reached the third-floor landing, Steve's door creaked open. He stood there, silhouetted against the dim light from his apartment, watching me. I gave him a sloppy wave and a lopsided smile, try to play it cool as I fumbled with my keys at my door. I turned to face my door, squinting at the keyring in my hand. The keys all looked identical in my hazy state, and I cursed under my breath, frustrated as I tried to figure out which one would let me in. That's when I felt him, Steve, right behind me. Before I could react, he grabbed my hand, the one clutching the keys. His grip was firm, too close for comfort, and his breath was hot against my ears. He murmured, "Let me help." My stomach twisted, but I was too drunk to pull away. He deftly picked out the right key, guiding it into the lock with precision that felt unervingly practiced. The door clicked open. Looking back, the moment could have seemed romantic in some twisted movie-like way. A neighbor helping a struggling girl get into her apartment. But then he leaned in closer, his face brushing against my hair. I heard him take a deep, shaky breath, his nose buried in my hair, inhaling like he was savoring it. My blood ran cold. Red alarm bells screamed in my head, slicing through the drunken fog. My breath caught in my throat, and a sickening realization hit me. I was alone, vulnerable, and this guy was way too close for comfort. I mumbled a weak, "Oh, thanks," my voice barely audible, and slipped through the door as fast as I could. I slammed it shut behind me, my hand shaking as I fumbled with the deadbolt, locking it with a loud click. I stood there, back pressed against the door, my heart pounding as I tried to process what had just happened. What the hell was that? I whispered to myself, my mind racing. Then I heard it, a soft thump on the other side of the door. My breath hitched. I froze, every muscle tensing as I slowly turned to the peephole. I pressed my eye to it, expecting to see Steve standing there, but all I saw was blackness. That didn't make sense. The staircase outside was always lit by a dim overhead light, casting a faint glow across the landing. There should have been something visible. I blinked, my heart hammering, and stepped back, my palms sweaty. I checked the peephole again, and this time I saw him. Steve, backing away from my door, his face pale in the faint light. My body felt like it had been plunged into ice water, a chill spreading from my chest to my fingertips. He turned and disappeared into his apartment across the hall. I didn't hear anything else that night, but I barely slept, my mind replaying the encounter over and over. For weeks after that, the soft thump became a haunting routine. Almost every night, I'd hear it, sometimes faint, sometimes louder, and when I checked the peephole, I'd catch Steve trying to peer into my apartment. His face was always too close, his heavy breathing audible through the door. Sometimes he'd linger, pawing at the door like he was testing it, though he never tried to force his way in. It was terrifying, a constant reminder of how close he was, how thin the barrier between us was. I stopped running into him during the day, as if he was deliberately avoiding me when I wasn't alone or vulnerable. I knew I should have called the police, But the thought of stirring up trouble with a neighbor I'd have to see every day stopped me. I didn't want to live in a constant state of animosity, trapped in my own home with someone who might hold a grudge. 2 weeks ago, Steve moved out. The relief was overwhelming, like a weight lifting off my chest. But the memory of those nights, his breath in my hair, the thumps at my door, the blackness in the peephole, still lingers, a shadow that makes me double-check my locks every time I come home. Back when my 2 friends and I were stationed at Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas, we decided Memorial Day weekend camping trip would be the perfect way to unwind. We packed our gear and headed up to Monjo Peak, just outside Ruidoso, New Mexico, planning to stay for 3 nights. The first 2 days were everything we'd hoped for, peaceful, relaxing, filled with the kind of quiet camaraderie that comes from being out in nature with good friends. We hiked, cooked over the fire, and soaked in the crisp mountain air, feeling like we'd escaped the grind of military life. On the first day, as we scouted the campsite for the best spot to pitch our tent, we noticed something odd. The area, spread across about 300 square meters with 5 designated tent sites, was littered with animal bones. They weren't piled up or arranged like someone had collected them, just scattered everywhere, bleached white by the sun. There were bones from deer, rabbits, maybe even smaller critters, dotting the ground like a grim reminder of the wilderness we were in. It gave us pause, but we brushed it off as nature's way and chose the highest point in the campsite, about 30 or 40 feet above the parking lot, for our tent. The elevation felt safer, offering a clear view of the surrounding area. The first 2 nights passed without incident, filled with laughter, shared meals, and the kind of easy conversation that flows when you're far from civilization. We even made friends with a couple at another campsite who had 2 dogs, happy, laid back, mutts who'd been wagging their tails and basking in the sun for the past 2 days. We'd shared lunch with the couple on the second day, swapping stories and enjoying the relaxed vibe of the trip. The other 2 groups camping nearby kept to themselves, but the atmosphere was friendly enough, everyone coexisting in the quiet beauty of Monjo Peak. Everything changed on the 3rd night. It was well after sunset, the sky a deep velvet black, when the forest around us went eerily silent. The usual chorus of crickets, rustling leaves, and distant animal calls just stopped. The silence was heavy, unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. I'm not sure how long it lasted before one of us brought it up, maybe a few minutes, but the tension was palpable. My friends and I exchanged uneasy glances, trying to laugh it off, but the hair on the back of my neck started to prickle. Goosebumps spread across my arms, a visceral warning that something wasn't right. I could see my friends getting jittery too, their eyes darting to the darkened tree line. Then, from one of the other campsites, the couple's dogs went absolutely berserk. These were the same relaxed dogs we'd petted and played with, but now they were barking and snarling like they'd seen a predator. The sound cut through the night, raw and frantic, sending my pulse racing. The other 2 groups at the campsite had gone quiet too, their fires flickering the distance, but no voices or movement breaking the stillness. It was as if everyone felt the same unspoken dread. Our car was parked about 60 meters from our campsite, down the hill in the lot. Without a word, we made a unanimous decision to grab our weapons, AR-15s and 9mm pistols we'd brought for safety. We weren't taking any chances. As we made our way back up from the car, a foul smell hit us, so strong it felt like a physical weight. It was a rancid, rotting stench, like burning feces mixed with the unmistakable odor of death. I'd smelled something similar once before, during a training exercise where waste had been disposed of improperly. But this was worse, cloying, almost tangible, like it was seeping into our clothes and skin. We hurried back to our campsite, the smell growing stronger with every step, and decided to post a guard for the rest of the night. One of us would stay awake while the other 2 tried to rest, rotating shifts to keep watch. I volunteered for the first shift. There was no way I was sleeping, not with that smell lingering in the forest so unnaturally quiet. We had plenty of firewood, especially since we were leaving the next morning. So I kept the fire roaring, piling on logs to make it blaze as brightly as possible. I figured if it was an animal out there, the fire would keep it at bay. I sat with my back to the flames, careful to preserve my night vision, my AR-15 resting across my lap. The forest to the southwest of our camp was sparse, with patches of burnt-out trees from some old fire, and beyond the tree line, the terrain dropped steeply. It wasn't impossible to navigate, but it was treacherous in the dark, the kind of place you wouldn't wander into without good reason. As I scanned the darkness, my eyes caught something, a stark white shape among the trees. It stood out against the blackened trunks, motionless. I raised my rifle, peering through the scope, but it didn't budge. At first, I thought it was just a tree, partially obscured by another, its pale bark catching the faint moonlight. I dismissed it and kept scanning, but the smell seemed to intensify, thick and suffocating. I grabbed my flashlight and swept the beam across the tree line, trying to shake the growing unease in my gut. When the light passed over that white shape, I saw it, an eye shine, bright and unnatural, staring back at me. My heart lurched. As soon as I registered it, the shape vanished, slipping behind a tree with a speed that made my skin crawl. I froze, my finger hovering near the trigger, debating whether to investigate. Every instinct screamed to stay put. Instead, I woke my friends, my voice low and urgent, and we huddled together, weapons ready, until my shift ended. When my watch was over, I crawled into my tent but left the rain fly off so I could see out if I needed to. I lay there, clutching my pistol, my ears straining for any sound beyond the crackle of the fire. The rest of my shift passed without incident, but that smell never fully faded. It lingered, heavy and oppressive, like a warning etched into the air. Just before dawn, as the first light crept over the horizon, the stench seemed to recede, but only slightly, as if whatever caused it had moved away but left its mark. It felt deliberate, like a predator staking its claim. We broke camp as soon as the sun was up, packing our gear with a speed born of unspoken agreement. Halfway through, I noticed the other three groups doing the same, their faces tense as they loaded their cars. I walked over to the couple with the dogs, hoping to make sense of the night. I asked if they'd seen anything, or if their dogs had calmed down after the barking stopped. They shook their heads, their expressions grim. They said the dogs hadn't slept all night. Even after the barking died down, they'd spent hours whining and growling, their eyes fixed on a hill to the southwest, the same direction I'd seen that white shape. The couple's voices were hushed, their hands gripping their leashes a little too tightly. We left Monjo Peak that morning, the weight of the night before hanging over us. None of us spoke much on the drive back, but the image of that eye shine and the stench of decay stayed with me, a reminder that something was out there, something we couldn't explain. Last spring, I started a part-time summer job at a sprawling, dilapidated building that used to be a country club before it fell into disrepair about a decade ago. The place had an eerie vibe, not because of anything overtly paranormal, but because of its sheer size and state of neglect. The endless hallways, hidden passages, and countless nooks and crannies gave it a labyrinthine feel, like something out of a ghost story. There were half-empty pools, a secret shower room with a sauna, and a tunnel of storage areas connecting the men's and women's bathrooms. The building was dotted with doors leading outside, far more than seemed necessary for its current use, a remnant of its days as a bustling country club. Now, we only use a small room for the golf course check-in, the kitchen, one upstairs dining room for the restaurant, and a small cafe area where early morning golfers grabbed their coffee or beer. That cafe was where I worked. Adding to the unsettling atmosphere was the story of the former manager, who had taken his own life in the main office upstairs when the club went out of business. It wasn't something I dwelled on, but it hung in the air like a faint shadow, making every creak and groan of the old building feel heavier. As a woman in my mid-20s, I'd lived in plenty of rough neighborhoods, so I was no stranger to staying vigilant. But this place tested my nerves in a way I hadn't expected. My shift started early, often before 6 a.m., before the sun had even risen. I was always the first person in the building, tasked with unlocking the front door, disarming the alarm, and making my way downstairs in the dark to open the cafe. The routine was always the same, and it never got less creepy. After disarming the alarm, I'd unlock a metal cage that kept the late-night bar patrons upstairs from wandering downstairs. Then came the worst part, a long, windowless hallway that stretched on forever, pitch black until I reached the light switch at the far end. Every morning, I'd grip my keys between my fingers like makeshift brass knuckles, a habit I'd picked up from living in sketchy areas. I'd inch along the walls, heart pounding, sliding past doorways in case something, or someone was lurking in the darkness. By the time I reached the end of the hall, my hands would be trembling as I fumbled for the right key to let myself into the cafe. Flipping on the light was a small relief, but my pulse would still race. My body braced for something to jump out at me. The strange occurrences started when Tim, a golf course employee, mentioned something odd. He kept finding the door between the men's locker room and the storage area, the one that led to the women's bathroom, wide open, even after he'd shut it multiple times. He'd also heard strange noises, faint but persistent, that he couldn't explain. The bar regulars upstairs, always eager for a story, started whispering that the place was haunted by the old manager, or maybe even others who they claimed had died within these walls. I didn't buy into the ghost talk, but the stories added to the building's oppressive atmosphere. Then there was Travis, my coworker in the cafe. A few minutes after we'd opened one morning, he went into the men's locker room and noticed something bizarre. The air was thick with steam, and it smelled strongly of soap, like someone had just taken a shower. Curious, he checked the shower room and found it sopping wet, the tiles still warm to the touch. But no one else was supposed to be in the building at that hour. Just us. Travis shrugged it off, assuming someone had slipped in unnoticed, but it left an uneasy feeling in the air. A couple of months later, Tim noticed another issue. There was a weird side door you could only access by climbing a rickety old staircase on the exterior of the building. It wasn't shutting properly, the latch misaligned. He fixed it, ensured it locked securely, and didn't think much more of it. But shortly after, someone from the golf course came to me with a startling discovery. They'd found what looked like someone's entire life packed away in one of the hundreds of unused lockers in the storage area. Clothes, personal items, toiletries, everything meticulously stashed, as if someone had been living there. They suspected whoever was had been sneaking into the storage room between the men's and women's bathrooms, slipping in after the golf course staff set the alarms in the evening, and leaving after I disarmed them in the morning. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut every morning as I shuffled blindly down that long, dark hallway, gripping my keys like a weapon. There had been someone hiding behind one of those pitch-black doorways. The thought made my skin crawl, my stomach churning with a mix of fear and violation. I'd been alone in that building, or so I thought, while someone was lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting. A few days later, the situation came to a head. A red-faced, angry man with a bald head and Vietnam-era Army-issued glasses stormed into cafe. He was puffing with rage, flailing his arms as he screamed about his belongings being thrown out. His voice echoed to the small space, raw and unhinged, as he ranted about his stuff. He marched over to the golf course office, still yelling, and the staff questioned him about the contents of the locker. His answers were specific enough to confirm it. This was a man who'd been secretly living in the building's dark passageways. I didn't catch his name or much about his story, whether he was dangerous, just homeless, or something else entirely. But watching him scream, his face contorted with fury, made it clear he wasn't entirely rational. His outburst left me shaken. The image of his wild eyes and flailing arms burned into my memory. I still work at the cafe, still make that nerve-wracking trek down the dark hallway every morning I'm scheduled. They tell me everything's secure now. The alarms are set, the doors locked properly, but it doesn't ease the creeping dread that settles in my chest each time I step into that building. The thought of someone hiding in those endless, Shadowy passages lingers, and I can't shake the feeling that the next time I flip on the light, I might not be alone. I've always been fascinated by the paranormal, though I've never really believed in it. As an atheist since childhood, I've made a hobby of digging into the logic behind so-called supernatural stories, unraveling the myths to find the truth beneath. It's entertaining, like solving a puzzle. But 7 years ago, when I was 15, something happened that I still can't explain, no matter how hard I've tried. I'm 22 now, and even after all this time, I haven't found a rational answer for what I saw. It's the one experience that makes me question whether there's something out there I can't logic away, something I witnessed with my own eyes that defies explanation. Maybe someone else has seen something like this and can shed light on what happened that day. It was 2010, and I was in the living room of my apartment with my best friend, Shivo, and my 5-year-old nephew. Shivo, who was older than me and the closest thing I had to a brother, was helping me babysit. We were playing a Dragon Ball video game, the kind with fast-paced battles and flashy moves, while my nephew watched, wide-eyed, soaking in action. I was getting absolutely destroyed, my character taking hit after hit, and by around 6 p.m., I'd had enough. Frustrated, I decided to switch games and ran to my bedroom to grab a different one. The apartment was small but cozy, with a hallway leading from the living room to the bedrooms and bathroom. All the doors and windows locked tight as always. As I rummaged through my game collection, I heard Shivo scream my name, Rick. The raw terror in his voice stopped me cold. Shivo wasn't just some guy. He was tough, a black belt like me, and we got into our fair share of trouble together, scrapping with kids at school. In all the years I'd known him, I'd never heard him sound scared, not once. That fear in his voice sent a chill down my spine, like ice water flooding my veins. My first thought was my nephew. Had something happened to him? I dropped the games and sprinted out of my room, my heart pounding as I raced down the hallway toward the living room. That's when I saw it. Something was running toward me, coming from the living room. It was small, about a foot shorter than me. I was around 5 feet tall at the time, but the sight of it froze my blood. It looked like a kid, but it was completely black, not like a person with dark skin, but like a living shadow, as if someone had sculpted a child out of pure darkness. Its form was distinct. Short black hair, eyes, nose, ears, all perfectly outlined but made of this inky, featureless blackness. It moved fast, running straight at me, and I instinctively jumped to the side to avoid it. As it passed, I caught a clear glimpse of its face, those shadowed features, unblinking eyes, and a small, expressionless mouth. It didn't make a sound, didn't acknowledge me, just bolted past and down the hall toward the bathroom. I stood there for a split second, my mind reeling, trying to process what the hell I'd just seen. I shook off the shock and ran to the living room, desperate to make sure Shivo and my nephew were okay. When I got there, Shivo was clutching my nephew tightly, his face pale as a ghost, his eyes wide with fear. My nephew, usually a bundle of energy, was trembling, his small hands gripping Shivo's shirt. Shivo looked at me, his voice shaking, and said, "Please tell me you saw that." I nodded, my throat tight, and I saw a flicker of relief mixed with the terror in his eyes. He hadn't imagined it. I'd seen it too, which meant it was real. Whatever it was, that realization made my stomach churn, a sickening mix of dread and confusion settling over me. We turned on every light in the apartment, the kitchen, the living room, every lamp we could find, to chase away the shadows. My nephew, still terrified, clung to us, his eyes darting nervously around the room. We told him to stay in the living room, not to move, while Shivo and I grabbed kitchen knives, the biggest ones we could find. We weren't taking any chances. With our makeshift weapons in hand, we moved cautiously down the hallway toward the bathroom, where the shadow kid had run. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear in my ears, each step heavy with the fear of what we might find. We reached the bathroom, pushed the door open, and found nothing. The room was empty, the air still. We checked every inch, behind the shower curtain, under the sink. Nothing. We didn't stop there. We searched the entire apartment, room by room, checking closets, under beds, anywhere something could hide. Every window was closed and locked. Every door secure, just as they'd been all day. Nothing was out of place, no signs of disturbance, no trace of whatever that thing was. It was as if it had appeared out of nowhere and vanished just as quickly. Defeated and shaken, we grabbed my nephew and barricaded ourselves in my bedroom, pushing a dresser against the door for good measure. We stayed there, knives close by, until my parents got home later that night. While we waited, I asked Shivo what he'd seen. He said he'd been playing a game against a computer, still in the living room, when he noticed my nephew staring at something off to the side, away from the TV. He followed my nephew's gaze and saw it. The shadow kid, just standing there in the living room, motionless, silent. It didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, its black form stark against the room's dim light. The sight of it hit Shivo like a punch, and when he screamed my name, the thing took off, bolting down the hallway toward where I'd been. My nephew, too young to fully explain what he'd seen, only said he'd noticed a kid standing there and was curious about who it was. But the fear in his eyes told us he felt the same wrongness we had. 7 years later, I still don't know what it was. I know it wasn't a hallucination. 3 of us saw it, each from a different angle, each with the same bone-deep terror. The doors were locked, the windows sealed, nothing disturbed. There was no way in or out, no explanation for how it appeared or where it went. I've spent years trying to find a logical answer, something to pin it on, a trick of the light, a prank, anything, but I've come up empty. Whatever that shadow kid was, it was real, and it left a mark on me that I can't shake. 7 years ago, when I was 16, my life was a complete mess. I won't delve into specifics, but everything around me felt like chaos, a storm I couldn't escape. Amidst it all, my Annie, my mom's close friend and someone I loved dearly, stepped in like a guardian angel. She saw the hell I was living in and decided to take me away from it. She welcomed me into her home, a simple yet cozy 2-story house in a small town, where I lived with her husband Mr. V, her niece Maria, and one of her sons, Juan. For a while, everything felt perfect, like I'd finally found a place where I belonged. Even though we didn't have much money, I was happier than I'd been in a long time, and slowly, things started to fall back into place. My Annie's house was modest but warm, a typical middle-class Mexican home with 2 bathrooms, 4 bedrooms, and all the usual furnishings you'd expect. I had my own room upstairs, a kind gesture from my Annie and Maria, who shared a room so I could have my privacy. Next to my room was their shared bedroom. Downstairs, Mr. V, my Annie's husband, spent most of his days. He was an older man, quiet and reserved, battling a serious illness that slowed him down considerably. He couldn't walk quickly, and my Annie devoted much of her time to caring for him. This detail is crucial, so keep it in mind. Mr. V and I didn't talk much, but he was kind to me, and I was polite in return. He'd pass his days watching TV, reading newspapers, or sitting outside in a plastic chair, soaking up the sunlight. Juan, my Annie's son, was like a brother to me. He was 8 or 9 years older, a big guy, tall and heavy-set, moving slowly because of his weight. He was funny and warm, but he struggled with alcoholism, a problem not uncommon in Mexican households. Despite this, I considered him family, having grown up with him. Maria and I went to school together, and afterward, we'd help my Annie with her work. Life felt good, almost idyllic, until one night changed everything forever. It was an ordinary evening. We had dinner together, chatted a bit, and watched some TV. Nothing out of the usual. Around midnight, I headed to my room, exhausted and ready for sleep. My room was spacious, with no closet, just a large rack holding my modest collection of clothes. My school uniform, a pair of jeans, a hoodie, and a few t-shirts. I've never been the type to own tons of clothes or a big collection of shoes. I was wearing my pajamas, an old, somewhat ugly pair of pants and a t-shirt. My phone, which I use as an alarm clock for school, was tucked under my pillow, and as always, I locked my bedroom door before bed, a habit I kept no matter where I stayed. I was sleeping soundly, lost in a pleasant dream, when something startled me awake. At first, I felt a strange sensation between my legs. My groggy mind wondered if I was having some kind of a rousing dream, but no, I was awake, and the feeling was real. It wasn't a dream. Something was rubbing against my private parts, and it started to hurt, a sharp, invasive pain that sent my heart racing. Fear gripped me, and tears streamed down my face as I lay there, frozen in silence, unsure what to do. My body tensed, every sense on high alert. I didn't dare move too quickly, terrified of what or who might be in my room. As quietly as I could, I reached for my phone under my pillow, my hands trembling. I couldn't believe this was happening. My mind raced. Could it be Juan? Mr. V? But Mr. V was frail and slow. There was no way he could move quickly enough to be here and escape unnoticed. Juan, too, was heavy and not exactly nimble. I thought if I pretended to stir or wake up, whoever was might stop. So I slowly shifted to the opposite side of the bed. To my relief, I felt a hand, or whatever was, pull back, retreating as if startled by my movement. My senses were razor sharp now. My ears picked up every sound, every creak in the house. I heard slow, deliberate movements, like someone heavy was trying to move quietly. It was pitch dark outside, and my room was shrouded in shadows, making it hard to see anything clearly. I strained my eyes, peering into the darkness, trying to make sense of what was happening. Slowly, I turned my head toward where the sensation had started, listening for any clue. The movements were cautious, calculated, as if someone was trying not to be noticed. I realized that if this person wanted to leave, they'd have to open the locked door and I'd hear it. Gripping my phone tightly, I prepared to shine its flashlight into the intruder's face. My heart pounded as I flicked it on, the beam cutting through the darkness. But there was nothing, no one. I scrambled out of bed, my breath shaky, and swept the light around the room. I checked behind the clothing rack, under the bed, every corner, nothing. Approaching the door, I called out for my mom, my voice trembling. To my horror, the door was still locked, just as I'd left it when I went to bed. No one could have gotten in or out without me hearing the lock turn. I broke down, sobbing, more terrified than ever. I was certain someone had touched me. I felt it, heard their movements, yet there was no trace of anyone. Overwhelmed, I ran to my auntie's room, waking her and Maria. Through tears, I explained everything. The sensation, the pain, the sounds, the locked door. We were all shaken. If it had been Juan or Mr. V, they'd have had to move faster than lightning to get downstairs or back to their rooms without making a sound. Mr. V's condition made that impossible, and Juan's size and habits ruled him out too. I stayed with my auntie and Maria for the rest of the night, too scared to be alone. The next morning, my mom arrived to pick me up. Her face held an expression I couldn't quite read at the time, a mix of concern and something unspoken, as if she knew more than she was letting on. We were all confused, grappling with what had happened. Months later, still haunted by that night, I pressed my mom for answers. What she told me sent chills down my spine. Years before my auntie lived there, the house had been a brothel, a crowded, sordid place where terrible things happened. The most shocking story was about a man who had murdered a girl there in a gruesome way. There were rumors of restless spirits, souls of men who died in that house, still lingering. Those stories swirled in my mind, offering a possible explanation for the unexplainable terror I'd experienced. I'll never know who or what was in my room that night. The fear, the violation, the confusion. It all lingers, a shadow from that October night in 2014 that I'll carry forever. Back in October 2014, my boyfriend Tony, his best friend Leland's girlfriend Erin, and I were inseparable, always hanging out together. With Halloween just around the corner, the air was thick with excitement for spooky thrills. One evening, out of the blue, Leland suggested we try a Ouija board. We all burst out laughing, thinking he was out of his mind. What kind of adults in their 20s would sit around on a Friday night playing with a Ouija board made from cardboard and a black Sharpie? It sounded ridiculous, but boredom got the better of us, so we decided to give it a shot just for laughs. We gathered around the makeshift board, the room dimly lit, the atmosphere light with our skepticism. We started with the usual cliche questions. Is anyone there? Are you an angry spirit? The planchette moved, but was sluggish, barely inching along. I figured one of us was nudging it, or maybe it was our subconscious at work, moving the piece without us realizing. We shrugged it off and decided to try again the next day, not expecting much. But the next session was when things got seriously weird, and fast. We asked again if anyone was there, and the planchette began spelling out a name, Anna, a girl we'd gone to school with who had taken her own life a few years earlier. We froze, staring at each other in stunned silence. I've changed her name here out of respect. Tony and Leland had known her, partied with her occasionally, but I didn't know her well. Her death was horrific and tragic, especially since it came just months after another young student in our small town had passed away. Losing 2 kids in one school year was unheard of in our tight-knit community, and had left a deep mark. I knew for a fact none of us would mess around by pretending to be Anna for a cheap laugh. Tony, Leland, and Aaron weren't those kind of people. We should have stopped right then and there, but curiosity, or maybe plain stupidity, kept us going. We asked the board when Anna's birthday was. The planchette moved to spell out March 8th. None of us were close enough to her to know her birthday offhand, so I pulled up her old Facebook page on my phone. My stomach churned when I saw it. Her birthday was indeed March 8th. We asked how old she was, and the board answered instantly, correctly stating her age at the time of her death. The more we asked, the stronger and faster the responses came. What started as slow, hesitant movements turned into the planchette gliding forcefully across the board, sometimes moving before we could even finish our questions. We were hooked, intrigued, but still skeptical. There was no way this could be real, right? It had to be one of us, or just a wild coincidence. To settle it once and for all, Leland and I stepped back into a corner, leaving Tony to try the board alone. To our shock, the planchette went wild. Tony started shouting out the letters as they came, his voice trembling with fear. Leland and I scrambled to write them down, piecing together the message, she can't. We were confused at first, but then it hit us. The board spelled out, she can't have you. My stomach dropped, a sickening dread washing over me. Leland and I exchanged a look of pure shock. Tony was visibly shaken, his face pale as he pushed the board away. Leland rushed to check on Tony, while I bolted toward the kitchen to flip on the lights, desperate to banish the darkness. As I turned, something hit me hard on the back of my head. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was nothing, just pitch-black darkness and a water bottle rolling across the floor. I stood there, frozen in disbelief, unable to process what had just happened. For about 15 minutes, I was too stunned to speak. Finally, I broke down crying and told everyone we had to stop. This wasn't fun anymore, it was terrifying. But even without us asking anything, the board kept moving, spelling out words on its own. The boys, still skeptical, demanded proof from whatever was controlling the board. Suddenly, the blinds in the room jerked downward, as if someone had yanked them with force. We asked again, and the blinds repeated the exact same motion, like an invisible hand was swiping at them. Then, all 6 candles we placed around the room for ambience snuffed out at the same time. A door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Cutlery flew off the table, clattering to the floor, and the lights flickered wildly. That was it. I'd had enough. Whatever this thing was, it was paranormal, and it clearly didn't like me. I was terrified for my safety, convinced this entity might come for me in my sleep, or worse. The board's final message, chillingly, was beware of Halloween. We stopped using the Ouija board that night, vowing never to touch it again, but the experience left us rattled. 2 weeks later, it was Halloween, and despite the lingering unease, we decided to shake it off and have some fun. We got dressed up, pre-drank way too much in our hotel room, and hit the clubs to soak up the nightlife. Outside a medical dispensary, a guy offered us free weed, and in our drunken, idiotic state, we said yes. Big mistake. The mix of too much alcohol and too much weed hit us hard, leaving us nauseous and miserable. We stumbled back to our hotel, hoping to sleep off the drug-induced haze. As we approached our room, I noticed the lights were on inside. I could have sworn I'd turned them all off before we left, but I brushed it off as a mistake. We entered, only to find the television blaring, a horror documentary about Ouija boards playing at full volume. We hadn't touched the TV all night, and to make matters worse, we couldn't even find the remote to turn it down. The Ouija board on the screen looked eerily familiar, almost identical to the cardboard one Leland had made. It was a gut punch moment for all of us, a chilling coincidence that brought back the terror of that night. The moral of the story? Never mess with a Ouija board. It's not a game. Don't be ignorant like we were. That experience changed me, and I'll never be the same. Summertime has always been my favorite season, especially as a photographer. There's something magical about capturing nature's beauty, whether it's the golden glow of daylight or the serene stillness of the night. If it weren't for my love of photography, I wouldn't have this story to tell. A story that, despite its terror, I'm grateful to be alive to share. It was the summer of 2012, and my new boyfriend at the time, Brad, and I were inseparable, bonded by our shared passion for the outdoors and taking pictures. One evening, after a cozy dinner, Brad suggested we head to Harborside Park, a local wharf in downtown, to capture some nighttime shots of the sailboats docked at the harbor. I was thrilled at the idea, my excitement bubbling over as I quickly gathered my camera, tripod, and a small bag of snacks, because with us, you never knew what spontaneous adventure might follow. Within 15 minutes, we were in the car, driving toward the park, the anticipation building with every mile. As soon as I stepped out of the car, the warm ocean air filled my senses, carrying the soothing sound of waves lapping against the shore. It was relaxing, almost hypnotic, and I couldn't wait to start snapping photos to capture the moment. Harborside Park was beautifully designed, with 2 pathways leading down to a main stage area lined with bench seating, almost like an outdoor cinema. But instead of the screen, you were treated to a stunning view of the waterfront. Further down, there were neatly trimmed square hedges and another platform with more benches, offering a closer view of the water. 2 floating wharfs extended into the harbor, where sailboats from all over the country were docked for the night. The scene was perfect, the boat silhouettes framed against the shimmering water, and I was eager to immortalize it through my lens. Brad, being his usual playful self, wandered down one of the wharfs and struck what I could only describe as cheesy 1990 school picture poses. I couldn't help but smile, thinking how lucky I was to have found someone so silly yet so perfect for me. I hurried to set up my tripod, wanted to catch him before he got camera shy. But just as I was about to attach my camera to complete the setup, a strange, unsettling feeling washed over me. It was the kind of gut-wrenching dread you get when you know bad news is coming. Except I had no reason to feel this way, or so I thought. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my body suddenly felt hyper-aware of my surroundings. I was standing facing Brad on the floating wharf, with a cinema-style seating area behind me. Then I heard it, a muffled man's voice, low and indistinct, impossible to make out. It stopped as abruptly as it started. I turned around, scanning the darkness, but saw nothing. Shaking it off, I returned to my camera, determined to get that hilarious shot of Brad with the boats in the background. I managed to snap a few photos, some silly, some worthy of a Facebook post. Then I shifted my focus to a striking German sailboat, its intricate woodwork and weathered, natural colors begging to be photographed. I zoomed in through my viewfinder, captivated by the details that spoke of long sea voyages. But then, I heard the voice again, closer this time, confirming my growing fear. My heart skipped a beat. I pulled away from the camera and looked up toward the platform above us. There, standing under the dim glow of a street lamp, was a man wearing a grimy gray sweatsuit. He was facing the road, not us, screaming gibberish I couldn't decipher. After a moment, I started to piece together fragments of his words. He was ranting about Satan, his voice wild and unhinged. Panic crept in, but I tried to stay calm. I turned to Brad, who was still on the wharf, and quickly told him what was happening. Brad made his way back to me, his expression shifting from playful to concerned as he saw the urgency in my eyes. The man must have heard me, because his attention snapped toward us. To my horror, he turned his head, only his head, toward me, his body still facing the road. His eyes were wide, almost bulging, and a sinister grin stretched across his face, ear to ear. It was the most chilling sight I'd ever seen. My blood ran cold as he locked his gaze on me and began descending the stairs to our level, moving with an eerie confidence, not even looking at his steps. I turned to Brad, my voice trembling as I told him the man was coming down. Brad reassured me, saying everything would be okay, but I could hear the strain in his voice as he saw the man too. Brad quickly devised a plan. We'd run to the opposite side of the platform and up a wheelchair ramp to avoid tripping on the stairs. As we started to move, the man picked up his pace, his footsteps heavy on the ground. He was now on our level, spitting and drooling, still screaming about Satan and muttering names of demons I'd never heard before. My legs felt like jelly. My heart pounding so hard was all I could hear. We bolted for the ramp, but the man mirrored our movements, cutting back toward the stairs he'd come from. Just then, headlights pierced the darkness as a blue truck with a security logo pulled into the park's entrance. Relief flooded through me. Holy hell, we might actually be safe. The truck stopped between us and the man. Brad ran to the driver's window, banging on it to get the guard's attention. The window rolled down reluctantly, and Brad explained the situation, pleading for us to get in the truck and be taken back to our car. But to our horror, the man had caught up, now standing on the opposite side of the truck, still grinning, his eyes wild. Instead of helping, the security guard panicked, rolled up his window, and began backing out of the lot. I couldn't believe it. He was abandoning us. The man seized the moment, dropping to his hands and knees, crawling around the truck toward us like a rabid animal, biting at the air, his teeth bared in a snarl. We screamed at the guard one last time as we circled the truck, tried to stay out of the man's reach. As the truck peeled away, leaving us alone with him, Brad grabbed my hand. The moment the man was on the opposite side, we sprinted up the ramp toward our car. Brad was frantically pressing the unlock button on his key fob as we ran, the distant beep of the car doors unlocking like a lifeline. We didn't dare look back to see if the man was following. Out of breath, we reached the car, the doors already unlocked. Those repetitive beeps were the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. We dove inside, slamming the doors and locking them immediately. I screamed at Brad to drive, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror. The man was nowhere in sight. No sign of him at the park entrance or on the road. We were safe, but my body was still shaking, adrenaline coursing through me. I didn't call the police afterward, convinced they wouldn't believe our story or find the man anyway. I regretted that decision later, but at the time, I was too shaken to think clearly. I did, however, call the security company to give them hell about their useless employee, furious at how he'd left us to fend for ourselves. Days later, I was watching the local news when my body went numb. A story flashed across the screen, complete with photo and video of the same man, wearing the same filthy gray sweatsuit, being led into court. That night, after we'd escaped, he'd hidden in the square hedges of Harborside Park and attacked another man, slashing his throat. The victim survived but was critically injured. The weight of guilt settled over me for not reporting the incident. though I was overwhelmed with relief that Brad and I had walked away unharmed. That night at Harborside Park was a brush with danger I'll never forget, a stark reminder of how quickly a perfect moment can turn into a nightmare. My name is Cuthbert, and my job as a night guard at the Oakwood office complex has become a waking nightmare. It all began on a Tuesday, under a night so quiet it felt like a heavy blanket pressing down on me. The silence wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a physical weight, thick and oppressive, settling into my bones as I made my usual rounds through the sprawling collection of buildings. The Oakwood complex, with its maze of low-rise structures, always seemed to teeter on the edge of abandonment in the small hours of the morning. Its darkened windows reflecting nothing but the occasional flicker of a street lamp. As I passed the east wing, a sudden movement caught my eye. There, just beyond a pool of light cast by a street lamp, stood a figure, tall, featureless, shrouded in darkness and utterly still. My heart lurched, pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I froze, my breath catching. "Hey!" I called out, my voice sounding thin and reedy, swallowed by the night air. "This is private property. You need to leave." No response, no movement, just that eerie, unnatural stillness, as if the figure wasn't part of the world but something imposed upon it. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my flashlight, the click of the switch sounding too loud in the quiet. The beam sliced through the darkness, but when it reached the spot where the figure stood, there was nothing, just empty pavement, bathed in the harsh glow of my light. "Get it together, Cuth," I muttered, dragging a hand over my face, my palm clammy against my skin. "You're seeing things." I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, a shadow cast by some stray branch, or a flicker of my tired eyes. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. The next night, it happened again. Same spot, same unnatural stillness. This time, I approached cautiously, one hand gripping my radio in case I needed to call for backup. My boot scuffed softly against the asphalt, each step deliberate. "Look," I said, try to inject authority into my voice despite the tremor I felt. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but you can't be here. Leave now or I'm calling the police." Again, no response. The figure stood like a statue, its presence pressing against my senses in a way I couldn't explain. It felt wrong, inhuman almost. I got within 20 feet before my nerve broke. Something about that silhouette, its edges too sharp against the night, made my skin crawl. I turned to head back to the security office, intending to call the real cops this time. But when I glanced over my shoulder, the figure was gone, leaving nothing but the empty glow of the street lamp. This pattern repeated night after night. The figure would appear, always in the same spot by the east wing, always vanishing when I got too close or dared to look away. My shift became something to dread, the long hours of darkness stretching out like a gauntlet I had to run. Sleep eluded me, replaced by a constant state of hypervigilance that left my nerves frayed and my eyes burning. By the end of the week, I couldn't take it anymore. The weight of those sleepless nights and the relentless presence of that figure had pushed me to the edge. I called my friend Ethelred, my voice tight with barely contained panic. "Red, I need your help," I said the moment he picked up, my words spilling out in a rush. "Something's happening at work, and I think I'm losing my mind." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Ethelred spoke, his tone was careful, laced with concern. "All right, Cuth, tell me everything." I poured out the whole story, my words tumbling over each other as I paced my small apartment. My eyes darted to the windows every few seconds, half expecting to see that damn figure standing on the street below, its featureless form staring up at me. I told him about the figure, the stillness, the way it vanished without a trace. When I finished, Ethelred was quiet for a long moment, the silence stretching taut between us. "Have you told your supervisors?" he asked finally. I let out a bitter laugh. "And tell them what? That I'm seeing spooky ghosts on my rounds? They'd fire me on the spot." "Okay, Fair point, Ethelred conceded, his voice softening. Look, here's what we'll do. Tonight, I'll come with you. I'll stay out of sight, but I'll be watching. We'll see if we can figure out what's really going on. Relief washed over me, so strong it made my knees weak. Thanks, Red, I said, my voice thick with gratitude. I was starting to think I was going crazy. Hey, what are friends for if not to help catch your spectral stalkers? His attempt at humor fell flat, but I appreciated the effort. It was a lifeline in the dark. That night, knowing Ethelred was nearby steadied my nerves, though my hand still shook as I gripped my flashlight. I began my rounds, eyes straining in the darkness, every shadow a potential threat. For the first hour, everything seemed normal, no sign of the figure. I started to relax, wondering if just maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe the stress of the job, the isolation, the endless nights had finally gotten to me. Then, as I turned the corner toward the east wing, I saw it. There it stood, in its usual spot, a darker shadow against the night. My heart rate spiked, sweat beading on my forehead despite the cool air. I gripped my flashlight tighter, my knuckles turning white. Okay, I muttered to myself, you got back up this time. Let's end this. I approached slowly, the beam of my flashlight trained on the figure. It remained motionless, seeming to absorb the light rather than reflect it, as if it were a void carved into the fabric of reality. This ends now, I called out, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. Who are you? What do you want? No response, no movement, just that unnerving stillness that seemed to mock my courage. I got closer than I ever had before, close enough to make out details. But the more I looked, the less sense it made. The figure's edges seemed to shift and warp, as if it wasn't quite solid. Its form flickering like a bad signal. What the hell are you? I whispered, moored myself then to the apparition before me. And then, for the first time, it moved. The figure's head turned toward me with a jerky, unnatural motion, like a marionette with tangled strings. Where a face should have been, there was only a swirling darkness, a void that seemed to pull at my very soul. Terror, pure and primal, surged through me, a tidal wave that drowned every rational thought. I stumbled backward, my flashlight clattered to ground as I turned to run. I collided with something solid, a scream tearing from my throat before I realized it was Ethelred, his face pale in the dim light. Cuth, what's wrong? What happened? He demanded, his hands gripping my arms. I spun back around, pointing with a shaking hand. There, don't you see it? But the spot where the figure had stood was empty, the pavement mocking me with its blankness. Ethelred gripped my shoulders, his eyes wide with concern. Cuth, there's nothing there. There's never been anything there. No. I shook my head vehemently, desperation clawing at my chest. No, you don't understand. It was right there. It looked at me, Red. It looked at me. Ethelred's expression softened, pity replacing concern. Cuth, he said gently. I've been watching all night. There's been nothing here but you. The world tilted beneath my feet, reality shifting like quicksand. Had I imagined it all? Was I truly losing my grip on reality? But I saw it. I insisted, my voice breaking. Every night, I've seen it. I think, Ethelred said, his voice careful, that maybe you need to talk to someone, a professional. This job, the stress, the isolation, it's not good for you. I wanted to argue, to make him understand. But as I looked at the empty spot where the figure had stood, doubt began to creep in, cold and insidious. Had I been chasing shadows all along? Was my mind playing tricks on me, conjuring phantoms from the darkness? The rest of the night passed in a blur. Ethelred stayed with me, his presence both a comfort and a silent indictment of my sanity. Every shadow made me flinch. Every sound had me spinning around, searching for a figure I was no longer sure existed. As dawn broke, painting the sky in pale pinks and golds, I made a decision. I couldn't go on like this. Whether the figure was real or a product of my fractured psyche, I needed help. I called my supervisor as soon as the office opened, my voice shaking as I explained that I needed some time off. To my surprise, she was understanding, even concerned. "Take all the time you need, Cuthbert," she said. "Your health comes first." As I hung up, a wave of exhaustion crashed over me. I hadn't truly slept in days, always on edge, always watching. I stumbled to my bed, collapsing onto it fully clothed, my body heavy with fatigue. But as I drifted off, a movement caught my eye. There, in the corner of my bedroom, stood a familiar silhouette, tall, featureless, utterly still. My heart lurched, but I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to be a hallucination, a trick of my overtired mind. When I opened them again, the figure was gone. As sleep finally claimed me, I couldn't shake the feeling that even here, in the supposed safety of my own home, I was being watched. That no matter where I went or what I did, that unsettling presence would always be there, just at the edge of my vision, waiting. The road ahead would be long and difficult. I knew. Therapy, maybe medication, a complete reevaluation of my life choices. But I was determined to reclaim my sanity, to banish the shadows that haunted me. Because now I understood just how fragile our grip on reality truly is, and how easily it can slip away in the long, dark hours of the night. The wind howled against the hotel window, a relentless, icy whistle that had been sneaking under the gap in the frame since I checked in. I was 10 stories up, in a room that was supposed to be a sanctuary during this work trip. But no matter how hard I pushed, twisted, or shoved, the damn window wouldn't close all the way. It was as if someone had wedged it open just enough to let the cold seep in, lingering in the room like an unwelcome guest, chilling the air and settling into my bones. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the sliver of darkness beyond the glass. The city lights twinkled in the distance, neon signs blinking like distant stars, and the faint hum of traffic was just audible through the gap, a reminder of the world continuing outside. This was meant to be a simple trip. A few days in a nice hotel, meetings with clients, and a brief escape from the chaos of home. But that gap in the window had been gnawing at my nerves from the moment I arrived. It was past midnight now, and the cold air trickling in carried a sharper chill, raising goosebumps along my arms. I stood, rubbing my hands together to ward off the cold, and crossed the room to the window. Gripping the latch, I felt frustration bubble up as I tried once again to force it shut. It budged half an inch, then stopped, the metal frame groaning with a dull creak. "Come on," I muttered, pushing harder, my voice sharp with irritation. "Just close, will you?" The window didn't move. I sighed, leaning my forehead against the cold glass, my breath fogging the pain. I wiped it away absently, my eyes drifting to the rows of identical buildings across the street. Most of their windows were dark, but one directly opposite mine glowed with a pale yellow light, spilling into the night. I squinted, trying to see if anyone was moving inside. Nothing, just a flicker of a TV screen, its colors flashing dimly. For some reason, the sight made me feel more alone, as if I were the only soul awake in this sprawling city. A gust of wind slipped through the gap, carrying a faint whispering noise, so soft I almost thought I'd imagined it. But then it came again, like a hushed voice teetering on the edge of comprehension. I leaned closer, pressing my ear against the frame, the cold metal biting into my skin. The wind hissed, and the whisper grew louder, threading through the draft like a needle pulling thread. I pulled back, shivering, the chill settling deeper into my chest. It was probably just the wind, I told myself, caught in the frame the way it sometimes does in old buildings. But it felt wrong, off, like something was trying to get in, something that didn't belong. I shook my head, rubbing my arms for warmth. "It's just a draft," I said aloud, the words sounding hollow in the quiet room. "You're overtired." I grabbed the remote from the nightstand and flicked on the TV. The screen flooded the room with a pale blue glow. Static hissed as I flipped through channels until I landed on an old sitcom rerun. its canned laughter jarring in the silence. I tried to let the noise drown out the unease creeping into my bones, sinking into bed and pulling the blanket over my legs. I must have drifted off at some point, lulled by the repetitive drone of the TV. Because the next thing I knew, a sharp metallic clack jolted me awake, slicing through the room like a gunshot. I bolted upright, the blanket tangling around my legs, my heart pounding as I scanned the room, disoriented. The window had swung open just a crack wider than before, enough to let a stream of cold air spill in, biting at my skin. The curtains fluttered softly in the breeze, and I cursed under my breath, stumbling to my feet. Damn thing, I muttered, crossing the room to shove the window shut with all my weight. Stupid, broken piece of... I stopped mid-sentence, my breath catching. On the glass, where my breath had fogged it earlier, there was something new. Smudge's fingerprints, long and narrow, smeared as if someone had dragged their hand down the pane. But they weren't mine. My pulse quickened, a cold sweat prickling my skin. There was no way I hadn't seen these earlier, had I? I rubbed my thumb over one of the prints, but it didn't budge. It was on the outside of the window. How? My voice cracked in the empty room, trailing off as a realization hit me. I glanced out again, more cautiously this time, the wind still howling, the city lights blinking back indifferently. The window across the street, the one that had been lit before, was now dark, its yellow glow extinguished. I shook my head, swallowing hard, trying to push down the unease clawing at my chest. It had to be a trick of the light, or maybe maintenance had been out there earlier, leaning out to check the frame, but the explanation felt flimsy, like a paper shield against a storm. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, my hands unsteady, and dialed the front desk. Front desk, this is Lucy. How can I help you? Her voice was bright, professional, despite the late hour. Yeah, hi, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm in room 1015, and there's an issue with my window. It won't close all the way, and it's letting in a draft. She paused, and I heard the soft clack of a keyboard. I'm sorry about that, sir. Our maintenance team is done for the night, but I can put in a request for tomorrow. I'd really appreciate that, I said, forcing calm into my tone despite the frustration simmering beneath. But one more thing. Is there any way someone could have been outside my window earlier? Like, working on the frame or something? Another pause, longer this time. On the 10th floor? No. Sir, we don't have any maintenance scheduled for that area tonight, and it would be against policy for anyone to be up there without notifying the front desk first. My grip tightened on the phone, my knuckles whitening. So no one's been up here? Not that I'm aware of. Is everything all right? I hesitated, the image of those fingerprints burning in my mind. Yeah, it's fine. I lied. Just send someone up in the morning, okay? Of course. Have a good night. I hung up, staring at the phone for a moment before setting it down. The TV was still playing, the canned laughter echoing unnaturally in the quiet room, grating on my nerves. I crossed to the bathroom, grabbed a towel, and stuffed it along the bottom of the window frame, trying to block the draft. As I did, I caught my reflection in the glass, and something else, a movement behind me, just for a split second, like a shadow shifting out of place. I whipped around, my breath catching in my throat, but the room was empty, my heart hammered in my chest, and I stood frozen, scanning every corner. Nothing. I was alone. I blinked hard, forcing myself to breathe, my hands trembling as I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. But every nerve in my body screamed that something was wrong. The next few hours were restless. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the hiss of the wind and the faint whispering draft that seemed to slip through the towel. Sleep tugged at me, but every time I closed my eyes, the image of those fingerprints, that fleeting shadow, played behind my eyelids. It was nearly 3 in the morning when I heard it again, a faint tapping, like fingernails rapping against a glass. I shot upright, the room spinning as I turned toward the window. There, on the other side of the glass, something moved, a shift, barely perceptible in the darkness. I leaned forward, my heart thudding so hard I thought it might burst, and squinted into the night. A face pale, almost blending into the darkness, stared back at me, its eyes unblinking, locked on mine. I scrambled back, my body slamming into the headboard with a jolt of pain that barely registered. My voice caught, words failing me. The face didn't move, press against the glass. Its lips parted slightly as if whispering something I couldn't hear. I grabbed a lamp from the nightstand, my hand shaking so badly I nearly dropped it and held it up like a weapon. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking with panic. But the face didn't move, it just stared, its eyes boring into me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Then, slowly, a hand rose, long fingers dragging down the glass, leaving foggy streaks that mirrored the smears I'd seen earlier. I lunged for the light switch, flooding the room with bright, artificial light. The face vanished, the window empty once more, but the fingerprints, the smears remained stark against the glass. My chest tightened, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps as I forced myself to stay calm. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my phone again, dialing the front desk with shaking fingers, pacing the room to keep from collapsing. "Front desk, this is Lucy," came a familiar voice, now tinged with concern. "Someone's outside my window," I said, my voice barely holding steady. "I don't know how, but someone's there. They were..." She cut me off, her tone sharp. "Sir, that's not possible. You're on the 10th floor. I'm telling you, someone was just there." I snapped, my eyes locked on the smears on the glass. I saw them. There was a pause, heavy with skepticism. "Sir, I think you should stay in your room and keep the door locked. I'll notify security." "Please, just send someone up now," I said, my voice breaking. I hung up and grabbed a chair, dragging it across the room with a screech that set my teeth on edge. I shoved it against a window frame, barricading it as best I could. The wind rattled louder now, the whispering draft slipping through the gaps, soft and insidious, just beyond the glass. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat on the bed, staring at the window, the towel fluttering where the draft crept in. The smudges on the glass remained, slowly fading as the room grew colder, the chill sinking deeper into my bones. By morning, when maintenance finally arrived, the window was locked tight, as if it had never been opened. The fingerprints were gone, the glass pristine, and the wind had stilled, leaving an eerie calm. But the cold remained, a lingering presence that clung to me like a second skin. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching from the other side of the glass, waiting for the night to return. The hum grew louder, a deep, bone-rattling vibration that seemed to rise from the earth itself, as if the ground beneath my feet was alive with some ancient, malevolent force. I stood at the edge of the field, my breath caught in my throat, staring in disbelief as the impossible unfolded before me. Every single beehive, dozens of them, stretching across the moonlit Montana field, was open and empty, their wooden frames standing like abandoned sentinels. My name is Dmitry Volov, and I've been an apiarist for over 20 years, tending the bees across countless farms. But nothing in my decades of experience had prepared me for the horror that awaited on this remote plot of land. It began as a routine visit. Earlier that day, Old Man Jenkins, a cantankerous farmer who ran a small honey operation on the side, had called me in a panic. "Something's wrong with my bees, Dmitri," he growled over the phone, his voice rough with urgency. "They ain't acting right. Need you to come take a look." His tone carried an edge I'd never heard before, and I knew better than to dismiss it. I arrived just before sunset, the sky painted in vibrant oranges and purples, casting a warm glow over Jenkins' weathered farmhouse. He met me on the porch, his face etched with worry lines deeper than usual, his eyes darting nervously toward the fields. "About time you got here," he grumbled. But there was a thread of relief in his voice, like he'd been holding his breath until I arrived. "They're out back. Been making a hell of a racket all day." As we walked toward the apiary, I noticed an unnatural tension in the air, a heaviness that pressed against my chest. The familiar, lazy buzzing of bees returning to their hives, for the night was gone, replaced by a low, pulsing hum that seemed to vibrate through my bones, setting my nerves on edge. "What the hell?" I muttered, quickening my pace, my boots crunching against the gravel path. We rounded the corner of the barn, and I stopped dead in my tracks. The beehives, usually a picture of orderly calm at this hour, were a frenzy of activity. Thick clouds of bees swarmed around each hive, their movements erratic, almost frantic, as if driven by some unseen force. "See what I mean?" Jenkins said, keeping his distance, his voice low and uneasy. "Ain't natural." I approached cautiously, my mind racing through possible explanations. Disease, parasites, environmental stress. But I'd never seen anything like this. The closer I got, the more intense the buzzing became, a chaotic symphony that seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. The bees were moving in unison, forming intricate, almost hypnotic patterns in the air, their wings catching the fading light. It was beautiful and terrifying, a dance that felt both alive and alien. "Mr. Jenkins," I called over my shoulder, my voice steady despite the growing unease in my gut. "I need you to call the state apiarist. This is beyond." A sudden gust of wind cut me off, sharp and cold, whipping through the field. The swarms of bees swirled faster, their hum rising to a fever pitch, a sound that seemed to claw at the inside of my skull. Then, as if responding to some silent command, they all shot straight up into the darkening sky, a black cloud vanishing into the twilight. In mere seconds, they were gone. The hive stood open, abandoned, and an eerie silence settled over the field, heavy and oppressive, like the calm before a storm. Jenkins and I stood there, dumbfounded, the weight of what we just witnessed pressing down on us. "What in God's name just happened?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. I shook my head, at a loss for words. "I don't know," I admitted, my throat tight. "I've never seen anything like it." We spent the next hour examining the hives, our flashlights cutting through the gathering darkness. There was no sign of disease, no dead bees, no clues to explain the mass exodus we'd witnessed. The wooden frames were intact, the honeycombs undisturbed, but the absence of the bees left a void that felt wrong, unnatural. As night fell, Jenkins reluctantly headed back to the house. His shoulders slumped. "You're welcome to stay the night," he offered, his voice gruff but kind. "Got a spare room if you want to keep an eye on things." I nodded, grateful. The thought of driving back to town in my shaken state wasn't appealing, and I wanted to be here when the bees returned. After a tense dinner of reheated stew and stale bread, during which neither of us spoke much, I retired to the guest room. Sleep eluded me, my mind replaying bizarre events of the evening, the hum still echoing in my ears. I tossed and turned, the creaky bed frame groaning beneath me, until just past midnight, when I heard it again, that hum, but different this time, deeper, more resonant, like the growl of some ancient machine. I was out of bed in an instant, grabbing my flashlight and rushing outside, the cold night air biting at my skin. The sight that greeted me will haunt me for the rest of my days. The beehives were open, just as we left them, but now, in the pale moonlight, I saw movement. Streams of what I thought were bees poured into the hives, their bodies glinting with an odd, silvery sheen that caught the light in a way no insect should. I approached slowly, my flashlight beam trembling in my hand as it cut through the darkness. As I got closer, my breath caught in my throat, a cold dread settling in my chest. These weren't bees. They were something else, metallic, with too many legs and glowing red eyes that pulsed faintly in the dark. They moved with mechanical precision, filing into the hives in perfect formation, like soldiers marching to an unseen drum. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling, struggling to process what I was seeing. What were these things? Where'd they come from? And where were Jenkins' real bees? A twig snapped behind me, and I whirled around, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Jenkins stood there, his face pale in the moonlight, his eyes wide with terror. "You see him too?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to form words, my throat dry as sandpaper. Jenkins took a shaky step forward, his gaze fixed on the hives. "What are they, Dimitri? What the hell is happening to my bees?" Before I could answer, a sharp pain shot to my ankle like a needle piercing my skin. I looked down to see one of the metallic creatures crawling up my leg, its legs digging into my flesh with a burning intensity. Panic seized me, and I tried to brush it off, but it clung tightly, its grip unrelenting. I stumbled backward, frantically swatting at my leg as more of the things emerged from the tall grass, swarming toward us with single-minded purpose, their red eyes glowing like embers in the dark. "Run!" I shouted at Jenkins, my voice raw with fear. "Get back to the house." We turned and fled, the alien hum growing louder behind us, a relentless drone that seemed to chase us across the field. I could feel more of the creatures crawling on me, their touch burning like fire, each step sending jolts of pain through my body. Jenkins was a few steps ahead, his labored breathing punctuated by curses and grunts of pain as he swatted at his own legs. We burst through the farmhouse door, slamming it shut behind us, our chests heaving. Jenkins immediately began boarding up the windows, grabbing planks from a pile in the corner and hammering them into place with trembling hands. I searched for something to treat our wounds, my mind racing as the burning sensation from the stings grew more intense. "Phone!" I gasped, clutching my ankle where the pain throbbed. "We need to call for help." Jenkins shook his head, his face grim. "Line's dead. Has been since sundown." A chill ran down my spine, colder than the night air. "Your cell phone?" "No service," he said, meeting my eyes, fear etched into every line of his weathered face. "We're on our own, son." The gravity of our situation sank in, heavy and suffocating. We were miles from the nearest neighbor, trapped in an old farmhouse with God knows what lurking outside, and we were injured, the burning from the stings spreading like wildfire through our bodies. I found an old first aid kit in a kitchen cabinet, its contents worn and faded, and began cleaning our wounds. The stings were unlike anything I'd ever seen, small, perfectly circular punctures surrounded by angry red flesh that pulsed with pain. As I dabbed antiseptic on Jenkins' arm, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. "Mr. Jenkins," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "look at this." Beneath his skin, barely visible, was a metallic glint, something moving under the surface, writhing like a living thing. Jenkins yanked his arm away, his face contorting in a mixture of pain and horror. "Get it out," he yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. "For God's sake, get out." I grabbed a pocket knife from the kitchen drawer, my hand shaking as I sterilized the blade with a lighter, the flame flickering in the dim light. Jenkins gritted his teeth, nodding for me to proceed, his eyes wide with fear. Taking a deep breath, I made a small incision over the moving lump, blood welling up instantly. Jenkins hissed in pain but held still, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. Using tweezers, I carefully probed the wound, my heart pounding. What I pulled out defied explanation. A tiny metallic creature, smaller than the ones outside, partially formed, its body gleaming with an unnatural sheen. As soon as it hit the air, it began to grow, its limbs unfolding like some nightmarish origami, its red eyes flickering to life. I dropped it in shock, and it scuttled across the floor with impossible speed. Jenkins stomped on it with his boot, grinding it into the floorboards until it stopped moving, its metallic body crunching under the pressure. We stared at each other, the reality of our situation sinking in like a stone. These things weren't just attacking us. They were trying to replicate, to spread, burrowing into our flesh like parasites. "We need to check ourselves," I said, my voice hoarse, barely recognizable. "All over, and we need to get these things out." What followed was one of the most grueling and terrifying experiences of my life. We spent hours examining every inch of our bodies, making small incisions with a knife, extracting the alien creatures wherever we found them. Each one we removed seemed to grow faster than the last, their bodies unfolding and twitching as they hit the air. Soon, the floor was littered with dozens of metallic horrors, their red eyes dimming as they died. But not before trying to scuttle away with a desperate mechanical urgency. We were covered in small, bleeding cuts, our hands slick with blood and antiseptic. But we pressed on, driven by the primal need to survive. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the cracks in the boarded windows, we finally finished. The floor was a battlefield of twitching, lifeless metal creatures, their bodies scattered like grotesque confetti. We were exhausted, our bodies crisscrossed with fresh cuts and bruises. But we were alive, and as far as we could tell, free of infestation. Jenkins peered out the window, his face gaunt with exhaustion. "They're gone," he said, his voice flat. "The hives are empty again." I joined him, scanning the field. He was right. There was no sign of the metallic swarm. The beehives stood open and abandoned, just as they had the evening before, their wooden frames silent in the morning light. "We need to burn them," I said, my voice firm despite the exhaustion weighing me down. "All of them. And then we need to warn people." Jenkins nodded grimly, his eyes haunted. "Who's going to believe us, though? Hell, I lived through it, and I can barely believe it myself." I looked down at my arms, crisscrossed with fresh cuts, the lingering burn of 100 tiny wounds pulsing beneath my skin. The pile of lifeless metal creatures on the floor gleamed faintly in the dawnlight, a testament to the nightmare we'd endured. "They'll have to believe us," I said, my voice steady with resolve. "Because if they don't, if these things spread—" I couldn't finish the thought, the implications too vast, too terrified to articulate. As we stepped outside, the morning sun warm on our faces, I was struck by how normal everything looked. Birds chirped in the trees, a gentle breeze rustled the grass, and the field stretched out before us, serene and untouched. It was as if the horrors of the night had been nothing but a shared nightmare, a fleeting delusion. But the pain in my body, the sting of my wounds, told a different story. Whatever had happened here, whatever these things were, our ordeal was far from over. As Jenkins went to fetch gasoline for the hives, I pulled out my phone. It screened dark with no signal, just as he'd said. But I opened the voice recorder anyway, my hands still trembling from the night's horrors. Someone needed to know what had happened here, what might still be happening. "My name is Dmitry Volov." I began, my voice rough with exhaustion. "I'm an apiarist, and I'm about to tell you something that will sound impossible, but I swear on my life, every word is true." The story spilled out of me, every terrifying detail etched vividly in my mind. The swarming bees, the metallic creatures, the burning pain of their stings, the desperate fight to survive. As I spoke, I watched Jenkins douse the hives with gasoline, the sharp smell filling the air. Soon they would burn, consuming any evidence of the nightmare we'd endured. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Those things, whatever they were still out there, waiting, growing, spreading. And we were the only ones who knew. The first time my phone rang with my own number on the caller ID, I laughed it off as a glitch, a quirky malfunction of modern technology. By the third call, a chill had settled deep in my bones, a cold dread that wouldn't let go. After a week, I was convinced I was living in a waking nightmare. My name is Ethel, and my own voice has become my tormentor, a relentless shadow that knows my every move, my every thought. It began on a Wednesday evening as I was preparing dinner in my small apartment kitchen. The rhythmic chopping of vegetables, carrots, onions, celery, was a soothing counterpoint to the stress of the day, a way to ground myself after hours of meetings and deadlines. The shrill ring of my phone cut through the quiet, jarring me from my focus. I reached for it absently, my eyes still on the cutting board, expecting a colleague or friend. But a double take at the screen, made me pause. The caller ID showed my own name, my own number. That's odd, I muttered, a mix of curiosity and unease stirring in my chest as I answered. Hello. Silence greeted me, broken only by a faint, staticky breathing that seemed to hum through the line. I frowned, about to hang up, when a voice spoke, my voice unmistakable and eerily calm. Hello, Ethel. Busy day, wasn't it? That meeting with Johnson was particularly stressful. The knife clattered from my suddenly numb fingers, hitting the counter with a sharp clank. My heart pounded, a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. Who is this? I demanded, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and anger. How do you know about my meeting? A soft laugh came through the phone, unsettlingly familiar, like listening to a recording of myself, but twisted somehow. I know everything about you, Ethel. I am you. The line went dead, leaving a deafening silence in its wake. I stood frozen, the phone still clutched to my ear, my heart racing so fast I could feel it in my throat. It had to be a prank, right? Some elaborate voice mimicry software. Maybe a hacker with too much time on their hands. But how did they know about my day? About the meeting with Johnson that had left me drained and frustrated? I tried to shake it off, to return to normal rhythms of my evening. Chopping vegetables, stirring the pot, but the unease lingered, a shadow that refused to fade. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind racing with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Was someone watching me? Listening? How could they know so much? The next day passed in a haze of paranoia. I jumped at every notification, scrutinized every caller ID, half expected my own number to flash across the screen again. But nothing out of the ordinary happened, and I began to wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing, if stress had finally pushed my mind to the edge. Then, as I was driving home from work, the city lights blurring past my windshield, my phone rang again. My number, my name, my fingers trembled as I answered, putting it on speaker to keep my hands on the wheel. Who are you? What do you want? I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. Oh, Ethel. My own voice sighed, tinged with a mocking disappointment that made my skin crawl. I told you I'm you, and right now, I want you to know that you really shouldn't have cut off that delivery truck back there. Very unsafe driving. I slammed on the brakes, pulling over to the shoulder of the road as my breath came in short, ragged gasps. My eyes darted to the rear-view mirror, half expecting to see someone watching me from the shadows. How could they know I'd cut off that truck? It had happened just minutes ago, a split-second decision born of frustration in rush hour traffic. Stop this, I pleaded, hating the quiver in my voice. Just tell me what you want. I want you to understand. My voice replied, its tone cryptic, almost amused. I'll be in touch. The calls continued, day after day, always from my number, always in my voice, always with intimate knowledge of my activities. It recounted conversations I'd had in empty rooms, thoughts I'd never spoken aloud, moments I was certain no one could have witnessed. I changed my phone number. The calls came to the new one within hours. I bought a burner phone, a cheap disposable thing, thinking it would be untraceable. Within hours, it rang with my original number. I turned off my phone entirely, hoping to cut off a connection. But then the landline in my apartment began to ring, my name flashing on the caller ID. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by a constant state of dread. I stopped answering my phone, stopped talking to friends and co-workers, my world shrinking to a prison of paranoia. Was someone watching me, listening to my every word, somehow reading my thoughts? After a week of this torment, I couldn't take it anymore. I broke down and called my best friend, Idra. Brr, I said as soon as she answered, my voice cracking with desperation. I need help. Something's happening, and I think I'm losing my mind. There was a pause on the other end of the line, the kind that told me she was weighing her words carefully. When Idra spoke, her tone was gentle but laced with concern. All right, Ethel, take a deep breath and tell me everything. I poured out the whole story, my words tumbling over each other in a frantic rush as I paced my apartment, checking windows, peering under furniture, searching for hidden cameras or microphones I knew I wouldn't find. I told her about the calls, the voice, the impossible knowledge I had of my life. When I finished, Idra was quiet for a long moment, the silence heavy with unspoken worry. "Have you gone to the police?" she asked finally. I let out a bitter laugh, my voice raw. "And tell them what? That I'm getting calls for myself? That my own voice is stalking me? They'd throw me in a padded cell." "Okay, fair point," Ida conceded, her tone softening. "Look, here's what we'll do. I'm coming over. We'll go through your apartment, your phone, everything. There has to be a logical explanation for this." Relief washed over me, so strong it made my knees weak. "Thank you, Burr," I said, my voice thick with gratitude. I was starting to think I was going crazy. "Hey, what are friends or if not to help unravel your possible psychotic breaks?" Her attempt at humor fell flat, but I appreciated the effort, a small anchor in the storm of my fear. An hour later, Idra arrived, her face set with determination, a bag slung over her shoulder filled with electronics I couldn't even name, scanners, cables, a laptop bristling with ports. We spent the next several hours combing through every inch of my apartment, searching for anything out of place, a hidden device, a bug, anything that could explain the calls. "I don't understand," Idra muttered, running a scanner over my phone for the third time, her brow furrowed in frustration. "There's no sign of any tampering, no unusual software, nothing." I slumped onto the couch, exhaustion and despair crashing over me like a wave. So, either I'm being haunted by my own digital ghost, or I'm completely insane, I said, my voice hollow. "Fantastic." Idra sat beside me, her face etched with concern, her usual confidence shaken. "We'll figure this out, Ethel," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "I promise." As if on cue, my phone began to ring, the screen lighting up with my number, my name. Idra's eyes widened, her breath catching. "Is that?" I nodded, my stomach churning, a sick dread settling in my chest. "Answer it." I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Put it on speaker." With a shaking hand, Idra accepted the call, her finger hovering over the speaker button. "Hello," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in her posture. "Hello, Idra." My voice purred from the speaker, smooth and chillingly familiar. "So nice of you to join us. Did you really think your little gadgets could find me?" Idra's face drained of color, her eyes flicking to mine in shock. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "How are you doing this?" A laugh, cold and eerily familiar, echoed through the room. "I told Ethel already. I'm her, the real her, the one who sees everything, knows everything. That's impossible." Idra snapped, but I could hear the tremor in her voice, the crack in her resolve. "Is it?" My voice challenged, its tone almost playful. "Shall I tell you what Ethel's thinking right now? How her heart is racing. How she's fighting the urge to snatch the phone and smash it. How she's wondering if she's trapped in some horrible dream." I felt the blood drain from my face, my breath catching in my throat. It was true, all of it. Every word mirrored the thoughts racing through my mind, the panic clawing at my chest. "Stop it." I choked out, my voice breaking. "Please, just stop." "Oh, Ethel," the voice sighed, almost fondly, a twisted mockery of affection. "I'm only just getting started." The line went dead, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like a physical force pressing down on us. Idra and I sat in stunned silence, the weight of what just happened suffocating. "Okay," Idra said finally, her voice shaky, her usual composure shattered. "Okay, this is not normal. This isn't some prank or hacking. This is something else entirely." I buried my face in my hands, feeling tears of frustration and fear burning behind my eyes. "What do I do, Burr?" I whispered. "How do I make this stop?" Idra was quiet for a long moment, her mind clearly racing. "I think," she said slowly. We need to go nuclear on this. Ditch all your electronics, your phone, your computer, everything. Move apartments. Hell, maybe even leave town for a while. Whatever this is, we need to cut it off at the source. The thought of abandoning my entire life was terrifying, like severing a limb to escape a trap. But as I glanced at my phone, sitting innocuously on the coffee table, its screen dark but somehow menacing, I knew she was right. I couldn't go on like this, living in fear of my own voice. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I took an indefinite leave from work, citing a family emergency, my voice shaking as I spoke to my boss. Idra helped me pack up my essentials, clothes, documents, a few personal items, leaving behind anything that could potentially be used to track or monitor me. My phone, my laptop, even my smartwatch stayed behind, abandoned like relics of a life I could no longer claim. As we loaded the last box into Idra's car, I took a final look at my apartment building, its familiar brick facade glowing faintly in the evening light. It had been my home for years, a place of comfort and routine, and now I was fleeing it like a criminal on the run. Ready? Idra asked gently, her hand resting on the car door. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, my throat tight with a mix of relief and trepidation. Was I really leaving this nightmare behind, or just running from something inescapable? We pulled away from the curb, the city streets stretching out before us, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope, a chance at freedom. We were halfway to the highway when Idra's car radio crackled to life, unprompted, the static giving way to a familiar voice, my voice smooth and chilling, filling the car like a poison. Did you really think it would be that easy to get away from me, Ethel? Idra slammed on the brakes, her face a mask of shock and fear as the car screeched to a halt on the shoulder. My heart pounded, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. My own laughter echoed from the speakers, cold and mocking, and in that moment, I felt something inside me break, a final tether to sanity snapping under the weight of an impossible truth. Whatever this was, wherever it came from, it wasn't confined to my phone or my apartment. It was everywhere. It was part of me, and I had no idea how to escape. It was well past midnight when I arrived at the hotel, the weight of a long day on the road pressing heavily on my shoulders. The lobby was nearly deserted, its polished marble floor reflecting the dim glow of overhead lights. The front desk clerk, a young woman with dark circles under her eyes, offered me a polite but weary smile as I approached. Her fingers tapped rhythmically on the keyboard, the sound sharp in the quiet space. "Mr. Parker, right?" she confirmed, glancing up at me, her voice professional but tinged with fatigue. "Yeah, that's me," I said, my voice rough from hours of driving. "Just here for the night." She nodded, handing me a key card, her expression distant but courteous. "You're in room 503. You're actually the only guest on the 5th floor tonight. We had to close off the other rooms for maintenance, so you'll have plenty of peace and quiet." I forced a tired smile, the promise of solitude sounding like a blessing after the endless hum of the highway. "That's perfect. I could use some sleep." She returned my smile, but there was something strained about it, a flicker of unease that seemed to linger in her eyes, as if she was holding back a thought she didn't want to share. I brushed it off, chalking it up to her exhaustion mirroring my own. I'd been driving all day, navigating through traffic and back roads, and the last thing I wanted was to stand there making small talk. "Let us know if you need anything," she said as I turned to leave, her voice flat, almost mechanical. "Thanks, will do," I replied, already heading toward the elevator, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder. The elevator ride was slow, the kind that feels like it's crawling through molasses, each floor ticking by with a faint ding. I pressed the button for the 5th floor, watching it light up, and leaned back against the wall, closing my eyes for a moment. The hum of the machinery vibrated through the metal, and my ears popped as the elevator groaned to a stop. The door slid open with a metallic hiss, revealing a long, dimly lit hallway. My footsteps echoed off the walls as I stepped out, the sound unnervingly loud in the silence. The lights were low, casting long, jagged shadows across the faded carpet. I noticed that every other room door was sealed with yellow maintenance tape, the signs hanging crookedly, their edges curling as if they'd been up for a while. The air felt colder here, a sharp contrast to the stuffy warmth of the lobby, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me as I made my way to room 503. I slid the key card into the slot, the lock clicking softly as the door swung open. Flicking on the light, I stepped inside, taking in the standard hotel setup. A neatly made bed with crisp white sheets, a small desk by the window, and the low, persistent hum of the air conditioner. But there was an odd, unsettled energy in the room, a feeling I couldn't quite place, like the air was holding its breath. I dropped my duffel bag on the chair by the desk, rubbing my eyes with the heels of my hands. Maybe it was the emptiness of the floor or the fatigue from the drive, but something felt off, like the room was watching me. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought, and unpacked the essentials: phone charger, toothbrush, a change of clothes, before collapsing onto the bed. The mattress was surprisingly comfortable, sinking just enough to cradle my aching body. And for a moment, I thought I'd be able to drift off as soon as my head hit the pillow. But just as I was slipping into the haze of sleep, a soft creak pierced the silence, like the groan of floorboards under weight. My eyes snapped open, my heart thudding in my chest as I lay still, listening. The sound had come from somewhere outside the room, just beyond the door. I held my breath, straining my ears, telling myself it was nothing. Buildings settle, pipes shift, noises echo, especially in empty places. But then it came again, closer this time, a slow, deliberate sound, like footsteps moving down the hall. I pushed myself up, my pulse quickening, and sat on the edge of the bed, my eyes locked on the door. It was a distinct rhythm, not the random creak of an old building. Someone was walking out there, their steps measured and heavy. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, my bare feet touching the cool carpet as I tiptoed toward the door, each step careful to avoid making noise. My hand hovered over the handle, hesitating. Maybe it was another guest who'd gotten lost, or a maintenance worker checking something despite the late hour. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and pressed my ear against the door that would cold against my skin. The footsteps had stopped, but I could feel a presence, as if someone was standing just on the other side, silent, listening. My hand trembled as I gripped the handle, the metal icy under my palm. I almost turned it, almost opened the door, but a primal instinct screamed at me to stop, a warning that coiled tight in my gut. My pulse raced, and I slowly stepped back, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid, that the emptiness of the floor was playing tricks on my mind. I returned to the bed, the tension in my chest growing heavier, and lay down, my eyes fixed on the crack of light under the door, waiting for the shadow of feet to pass by. But there was nothing, just an oppressive silence that seemed to thicken the air. After what felt like an eternity, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. It was late, I was exhausted, and the stress of travel was getting to me. I took a deep breath, turned off the light, and tried to relax, pulling the blanket up to my chin. But the darkness felt heavier now, pressing in from all sides, making the room feel smaller, the air denser. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I heard the knocking, 3 quick, sharp taps right on the door. I shot up, my body rigid, ears straining for any other sound. The knocking came again, louder this time, insistent. "Sir, it's the front desk." A voice called, muffled but calm, measured, unmistakably the same woman who had checked me in. "Is everything all right in there?" I hesitated, my voice catching my throat. "Yeah, I'm fine," I called out, my words wavering unsteady. "We had a report of noise coming from your room," she continued, her tone steady but oddly flat. "Can you please open the door?" I frowned, my mind racing. Noise? I hadn't made any noise. I'd barely moved since collapsing onto the bed. Something felt wrong. The way her voice came through the door, too even, too distant. Why would she come up herself instead of sending security? "I'd rather not open the door," I said, standing now, the cold seeping into my feet through the carpet. Everything's fine in here. There was another long silence, heavy and unnerving, and the sound of footsteps receding down the hall, slow and deliberate. I felt a wave of relief, but it was fleeting, overshadowed by a growing sense of unease. I moved to the door, my heart still racing, and peered through the peephole, half expecting to see her heading back to the elevator. The hallway was empty, the dim lights casting long shadows across the carpet, the maintenance signs hanging silently on the closed doors. I stepped back, my breath uneven, and grabbed my phone, deciding to call the front desk directly. The line rang twice before the same clerk picked up, her voice bright and professional. "Front desk, how may I assist you?" I hesitated, my grip tightening on the phone. "Hi, I'm in room 503. Someone just knocked on my door, said they were from the front desk, but—" "I'm sorry, sir," she interrupted, her tone calm, almost robotic. "No one has been sent to your floor tonight." My stomach dropped, a cold dread spreading through me. "But I heard someone," I insisted, my voice rising. "They said they were from the front desk." Her tone remained neutral, unshaken. "There are no staff on your floor, sir. I would advise you to keep your door locked. We've had incidents before." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles whitening. What kind of incidents? There was a long pause, the silence stretching taut. "Sometimes guests report disturbances," she said finally. "We believe it's related to the renovations. Please stay in your room until morning." She hung up before I could ask anything else, the dial tone sharp in my ear. My hand shook as I set the phone down, my eyes darting to the door, checking the bolt to ensure it was firmly in place. The air in the room felt colder now, the hum of the air conditioner louder, more oppressive. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand. 2:45 a.m. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together what had just happened. The hotel had seemed normal enough when I checked in, maybe a bit dated, with its faded carpet and slightly worn furniture, but clean, well kept. Now, everything felt wrong, like I was missing a crucial piece of a puzzle, the one that would tie it all together. I must have dozed off at some point, exhaustion pulling me under despite the tension, because I woke to the sound of footsteps again, slow, deliberate, right outside my door. My eyes flew open, my heart pounding as I held my breath, listening. I reached for my phone but didn't call, not yet. I needed to know. I crept toward the door, the carpet muffling my steps, and leaned in, peering through the peephole. The hallway stretched out in both directions, dimly lit by the emergency lights, the maintenance signs hanging loosely on the doors. At first, I saw nothing, just the empty corridor, silent and still. Then a figure appeared, a man tall, wearing a dark coat, his movements slow, almost predatory. His head was tilted, as if listening for something, his face obscured by the shadows. He stopped in front of my door, and my pulse quickened, my breath catching in my throat. He knocked. 3 sharp raps, just like before. "Sir," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper, "we need to move you to another room." I gripped the handle, the metal cold under my palm, my heart hammering. "Who are you?" I called, my voice steadier than I felt. "Security," the man replied, his tone flat, emotionless. "There's been a mistake. This room is reserved." My mind raced. Reserved? For who? "I'm not opening the door," I said, my voice firm despite the fear clawing at my chest. Another pause, longer this time. Then his voice, softer now, almost coaxing. "It's not safe in there." My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. "I'm calling the front desk," I said, stepping back, my hand still on the handle. He didn't respond. I heard his footsteps move away, slow and steady, fading into the silence of the hallway. I didn't look out again, my back pressed against the wall, the phone clutched tightly in my hand, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Morning couldn't come fast enough. When I checked out the next day, the lobby was quiet, the morning light filtering through the windows, casting a warm glow over the marble floor. The same front desk clerk was there, offering me that same polite, tired smile. "Everything all right, Mr. Parker?" she asked, her voice professional but distant. I hesitated, gripping the strap of my duffel bag, the weight of the night heavy on my shoulders. "There was someone outside my room last night," I said, watching her closely. "Said they were security." Her eyes flicked up, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of recognition, a shadow of something unspoken. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said smoothly. "We've had issues with unauthorized guests before. We're addressing it." I opened my mouth to press further, to demand answers, but something about her tone, her expression, stopped me cold. She wouldn't tell me anything more. I could feel it. I nodded, turning to leave, the weight of her gaze on my back. As I walked out of the hotel, the morning sun breaking over the skyline, I glanced back up at the 5th floor. All the windows were dark, their curtains drawn, and I had a sinking feeling that room 503 was still waiting, reserved for someone else.